right? I could tell you, go be a loving person. Go be a kind person. Bring more kindness into the world, right? So each person would understand something different how to do that, right? Some people would think, okay, I'm going to give more tzedakah. I'm going to go be nice to people. I'm going to smile at people, right? So here in this parak, the tzaddik, the Ramak, is teaching us all the subtleties of how to do it in ways that we never would have even imagined, and how to use all the different parts of ourselves, right? There we have specifically the face, in order to bring keter, bring Hashem's compassion into the world, his love into the world, and again, I said I was going to just do a 5-second review each at the beginning of each year. And it's important to remember that what we do down here, that's what arouses in heaven, in the higher spheres, in the spiritual worlds, that type of thing. So if I'm being harsh in my life now, so then I bring harshness into the world spiritually. If I'm being kind, so I bring kindness into the world, right? And it doesn't mean just if I'm able to actually physically reach people and do a physical act of kindness, even in my thoughts, right? And so that's what we're learning in this chapter is different ways, subtle ways that a person is emulating the midah of keter throughout his life, and how deeply it goes, and how we can affect people through the different parts of our body, and where we should place ourselves mentally, spiritually, psychologically throughout the day, as people who, this kind of goes without saying, but we're saying it, but just like the koteret, the headline is, how can we make the world a world of loving kindness, of chesed, of keter? That's what we want to bring into the world. So we learned already about the head, the actual head, and then last week we learned about machshavot, about thoughts. And I'll just review just a second that he said that the Ramak said that what does it mean to use our thoughts for keter? To think thoughts of loving kindness and goodness, and how to bestow good, right? A person should be just like, how you have some people who are like business entrepreneurs, and they're all the time, you're talking to them and you see they're not with you because they're like thinking of ideas, right? How to make more money, or I got a different idea, right? And then they get a smile on their face, and the light bulb went off, right? So this kind of machshava is always thinking thoughts. How can I be kind to a person? How can I give something good? How can I brighten their day, right? And one more thing, and this I didn't speak so much about last time. I just want to speak one more point. Is that he said, in the thought of keter, the mindset of keter is that it doesn't let negative thoughts come in there, right? So I think I told you guys a story once of a friend of mine who had a conversation with a Chabad Rebbitzin in Austin, Texas, and he had just learned about the concept of Shmirat Einayim, guarding our eyes, and he said, "What? I can't even look." Right? He was a college boy, he was a good old boy, and so the Rebbitzin said the most brilliant line. She said, "The first look is free, the second one you have to pay for," right? Meaning, right? We can't help what comes in front of our eyes, right? But if you keep looking at it, that's already your decision. That's where your free will comes into play. So too your thoughts. We have many. I don't know how to quantify it. The amount of negative thoughts that a person has throughout the day are amazing, right? I think I told you guys also that the PSS and Rabbi says if you would follow a person's thoughts from the beginning of the day to the end of the day, and you would compare his thoughts to a person who is totally unhealthy, right, in a very bad way, you'd see it's not so much different. The only difference is that this person knows what to act upon and what is not appropriate to act upon. Right? This one knows what's not appropriate to act upon. But we have bad thoughts throughout the day, so what are you supposed to do with that? So when the Ramak says, the midah of keter, we don't let negative thoughts come into our mind, I don't have control over negative thoughts, right? Right? In therapy, I all the time, I'm working with people that feel that they don't have control over their thoughts. Obsessive thinking, right? It keeps on coming. So the first thing we have to know is we have to be empowered to know we can control our thoughts. You can't control what comes in, but you can control what stays in, right? We said the story about the Kotzker Rebbe, right? And the Chassidut that they were taking out his furniture, and the Rabbi told them, "You're just like right." It was a long story, so I'm not going to go over it again. But the point is that the point that I want to make is that these are things that you get used to, right? If you start learning an instrument and guitar, and your fingers just will not go to the place where the instructor is telling you to put them, and you have to manually pick it up and do it, and then it's fighting it.
The B
right?
chord. It's brutal.
The B chord is brutal, right? There you go.
How do you even do that?
An actual live example. So I've been playing guitar for 30-something years, and when I pick up a guitar, and like automatically my fingers just go to the place. It's just automatic, right? It wasn't like that when I first picked up a guitar, of course, right? You get used to this. So at first, if you're a kind of person who, like, a negative thought, let's say, about another person comes into your mind, and then you go with it, you believe it, and you start flowing with it, and you start playing out a whole scene in your mind. What would an interaction be like, right? And then after like 30 minutes, you're all worked up, and you're like, maybe or somebody says something, and you're like, well, maybe I was wrong, right? It took you 30 minutes to get rid of the thought, let's say. Or maybe you're a person that, no, it stays in for 20 seconds, right? A guy cuts you off on the road, right? I made a mistake last week, actually, when I was leaving Machon Meir. I accidentally ran a red light. I thought it was green, but then I realized as the lady was like just about to run into me that I'd made a mistake, and she honked me, and then I went like this, and then we were both at a red light, and I was going to roll my window down to apologize to her, and she was giving me this look like, all right, and I was like, I'm so sorry, and her face turned from like that bitterness to like, okay, again, right? So what was I telling?
How long the thought stays, the negative thought stays.
Right. So for 2 seconds after, 2 seconds, right, it's gone. But so you can develop a skill where, yes, a negative thought comes into your head and you push it out. You push it out. You can develop a skill. So too, we'll see. Same thing. We're talking about it now, but with your eyes, right? When you grow up in secular culture, not only are you not taught that you should not look at everything, you look at everything. You're encouraged to look at everything, right? Not as a value, but just because there's so much stuff coming in front of your eyes all the time, right? We're just flooded with imagery and with looking at people, and it's not a value at all not to look, right? So too with a lashon hara, right? You can get to a point where you're so sensitive to what you listen to and what you speak about, right? That even though you might have like an initial instinct to look or to think that way or to speak that way or to listen in that way, right? But then you can become a master, that you push it out, that you control it, you refocus, right? Right? And like we said last time, Shmirat Einayim is like the Pleasantness Rabbi says, it shouldn't be a guarding your eyes when you go out in public shouldn't be a thing where you're on guard the whole time. It should be that you're so filled with good thoughts, and you fill yourself up before you go, you're already occupied, right? And this is an amazing thing Rabbi Nachman says, and then we're going to go forward today. Rabbi Nachman says that our minds are created in a way that you can only think one thought at a time. So if you have a bad thought, right, if you bring another one in, automatically it pushes it out, right? And Rabbi Nachman talks about how we have this battle sometimes for what's occupying our thought at that moment. So you should have a good thought already in your pocket. Keep it at what do you call it? Keep it ready, handy, so you can always bring it in, right? At any moment. And then, but the skill is shifting it. You do it manually until it becomes like you can play that B chord in your sleep. Right? Okay. Now the shlishit. So we talked about head and we talked about thoughts, and now we're actually going to the face. Now you guys remember last week, at the very end of last week, we went through the different parts of the face and we showed how each one was a different aspect of the 10 sfirot, right? And now we're going to go into metzach, into the forehead. And I did give you guys a little introduction into the metzach last week about the story about the Arizal and Rav Chaim Vital. Now I just want to read you a little bit more. There's a sefer called Kal V'Yosher. It's about a 400-year-old sefer or so. And it's a very, very, very fundamental sefer, a lot of Jewish thinking, the way we view the world, you can learn from this sefer. So here's where he brings that story where where we have the 22 letters of the Aleph base on our forehead, right? And they're shining. But depending on what a person does, they're shining in a different way. So we can't really see it. We can't discern. Maybe you guys can see on my forehead. I don't know. I can't see on anybody else's forehead. So you don't have to be worried. Right. So we saw last time that the Arizal saw. He told the Rav Chaim Vital, the Gimel. I see all the 22 letters are shining beautifully, except for the Gimel. On your forehead is backwards because you're not bestowing enough chesed on your father, right? And that's why the Gimel was turned backwards. It was facing the Aleph base. Gimel is to gomel, to give. Aleph base is av, right? To gomel to the av, right? So, and the Rav Chaim Vital was like really shaken up by that. It's pretty scary. The Arizal was really the last one that could like tell you, not the last one, but in the most amazing way, tell you exactly what is going on with you, like exactly.
Yeah, Rav Newman told me a story about a sofer who could take something out of the mezuzah that you had on your wall. So, for example, if the ayin had a little nick, and he told to someone near, your daughter will have something behind her ear. So she had lice, and from the stuff that cured it, she had like a rash on the back of the ear. So
wow.
There are some people there.
Right. In the cemetery, just not far from here, Har Menuchos is that Rav. They call Bala Mezuzot, the master of the mezuzahs, right? So now I'm just going to read you here. It says, "V'odama Arizal letamidav." The Arizal taught his students the following: He called out mitzvah. Anybody that does a mitzvah, azay ota mitzvah hineshemet b'metzach adam be'ot achad. So that mitzvah, it is, how do you say nirsham? It's imprinted, right, onto the person's forehead. One letter, right? Which letter? He says mina aleph beis shelesim v'shtayim otiyot. One of the 22 letters. Each one of the mitzvot is connected to a particular letter of the aleph bet, right? So in Kabbalah, this is all like oceans of learning around all these subjects, but we're just touching it. So one letter, and it becomes nirsham, becomes imprinted on your forehead. Vehi meira b'fanav, and it shines on your forehead. Kisha oseh mitzvah. It's imprinted on your forehead when you do the mitzvah, right? But it can't be seen yet, right? When you do the pam shenit, when you do the mitzvah the second time, so then it starts to shine on your forehead. Ki b'pam rishon inivlat bifnim. The first time it becomes infused, but it doesn't shine, right? Ub'pam shenit iboletet umitnatzet. And the second time it's already like sticking out, it's protruding. This is all spiritual. We can't understand why. B'chol zehu b'shar mitzvot. All this is true of all the mitzvot except for one. Masha'en ken b'tzedakah. When you do tzedakah. So then tzedakah eina nivlat bifnim kamo shar otiyot. Tzedakah doesn't get like infused in the person's forehead. Ela meira b'mitzchot tekef. It right away shines. Besod, and this is the secret what the pasuk says in Tehillim. V'tzidkato medid la. The person's tzidkut, its tzedakah, it stands forever. In the Ksavim of the Arizal, it explains how this is, so for different mitzvot, this is true if at the time that you're doing the mitzvah, or if it stays with you afterwards, right? At the time, right? Like for instance, Torah stays with the person all the time, as opposed to the mitzvah, it's at the time that he's doing it, right? And there's a leftover depending on how many times he did it. He says, "V'chen k'shadam over avera." This is just interesting. So too, when a person does a sin. So then also, it's not shining on his forehead, but it's nirmaz, it's alluded to. There's some type of something on his forehead that becomes, it can be seen. He says, be'esh chora, with black fire. Something spiritual. מכל מקום אם מתחרט, ויגע ויצרח ויתקן בעשיית תשובה עיוות שעשה, אז המסלק החושך ואש שחורה אשר הושת במצחו מהעוון. When he does tshuva and he has remorse and he wants to fix it, so then it becomes removed from his forehead. ובשבס, on Shabbat, כשבאה הנשמה יתרה. So when does the extra soul start to come into you? Does anybody know?
Kabbalat Shabbat.
We got one vote for Kabbalat Shabbat. Anybody else? So it's a trick question, really, because there's really, you guys know our neshama we have 5 levels of our soul, right? Nefesh, ruach, neshama, chaya, yechida. So each one comes, and it comes in stages, right? Really, at the time when you say, and this is good kavanah for you, when you're saying Baruch Hu and Mariv of Kabbalat Shabbat, so Baruch Hu, so when you answer, Baruch Hashem Avarach Le'Levad is five words, and it's connected the 5 different levels of the soul, because that's the moment where they all come in, right? In a simplistic way. There's different opinions, but that's right. But the minute that the nefesh yitera starts to come in, is at chatzot of midday on erev Shabbat, right? And that's why there's a lot written about on erev Shabbat midday. That's we go to the mikveh after that, and things we should do before and after. But in any event, so when we're talking about the sign on our forehead, it says v'Shabbat Shabbat neshama yitera achar chatzot liYisrael azay yitkaseh oto avon mikol v'kol. So the neshama yisera, it covers up that legamre entirely, right? And he says unless a person has too much caring that he had a seminal emission, and then he has to go to the mikveh, and only then it's totally erased from his forehead. But just the neshama yisera itself comes and it wipes it away. So
Every week.
every week, yeah.
So it's like a fresh start. Every week.
Totally fresh start.
Cool.
Totally fresh start. And that's why Dafka on Erev Shabbos is a very important time to do tshuva, right? And one of the concepts that we in Lecha Dodi, we turn around in Boi B'Shalom. One of the things that we do, the reason why we turn around, the deeper reason why we turn around, is because we're turning back at everything that happened this week. We're looking backwards now at everything that I said, everything I did. When I was in yeshiva, my Rosh Yeshiva of Hyman Shlita he would stop us before Boi B'Shalom, and he would say, now we're going to turn towards everything that we did this week with our thoughts, with our speech, and with our actions, and we're gonna have a moment of tshuva, reflecting, and we're gonna everything that we said that wasn't proper, wasn't appropriate, wasn't good. We want to collect it, and we want to bring it back with us to face forward again, right? To bring it with us, to include it, right? So that kind of tshuva. So that's a very important part of Shabbos. That's what the Sfarim HaKadoshim said. Shabbat is Rosh Tevot. It's an acronym. Shabbat Bo Teshuv. On Shabbat, the person should do tshuva. Of course, it's a tshuva of love. It's not like crying and pulling out our hair, like you guys were doing on Yom Kippur, right? Right. Shabbos is different. Okay. In any event, we have these foreheads that we always thought was just kind of like makom patur, like there was nothing going on our foreheads, right? Until we started talking about all this stuff. When's the last time you guys thought about your foreheads? Right? Or looked at another person's forehead, other than just maybe if you notice if they have, particularly interesting, lines in their forehead. Nobody thinks about people's foreheads really, right? So that's something we think about. So here the Ramak is gonna teach us. Ashlishit mitzchot lo yebo koshi klal. In your forehead there shouldn't be any koshi, any difficulty at all, any harshness. Do you ever feel harshness from a person's forehead? So if he doesn't see it in a conscious level, but his soul sees it, right? You pick it up, right? You pick it up from all the parts of a person's face, right? It's in the world of psychology, they have when they're teaching therapists how to discern body language, right? And so they'll have like a chart of like a facial expressions, like literally like 500, the same person making a face like, each one is like a little bit more, and then the eyes, and then to like notice all these things. So you notice it whether you've ever thought about it consciously or not. You notice it, and when a person is being harsh, the harshness comes through their forehead. Ela, so how are we supposed to do it? We should make ourselves like the metzach haratzon. The metzach haratzon is the forehead of goodwill. Look at the forehead of goodwill. That's looking back. Let's do this. That's good. Maybe we could go around. Right. The metzach haratzon. Every good Hasidic rabbi has a good rabbi. Right. So, what does it mean? The metzach haratzon, the forehead of goodwill, is a term that the Zohar HaKadosh uses for an expression of a Kadosh Baruch Hu from the place. We're not going to go too technical, but I'm just going to say it just so you guys hear it. So later on when you go and you open up these deeper svarim and you're learning from a place called Atika Kadisha, which is one of the names of Hashem. Atika Kadisha means the holy ancient one, right? And when it says ancient, it doesn't mean chronologically in time, but it means the oldest, the highest, the most exalted place of Hashem. Kind of like Keter, right? Keter and all the way down to Malchut, it's all happening at the same time, but Keter is the beginning of the, right? So too, the ultimate highest place of Hashem, which Atika, Kadisha, the ancient holy one, is the place of Keter. It's connected to the midah of Keter. I'm not trying to get too technical, so forgive me if it's sounding too technical. The point is in that place, it says that Hashem has a metzach haratzon. He has a forehead of goodwill, right? Meaning, there's other places where a person could have what's called az metzach, right? There's a term in Tanakh that says az metzach. A person has a brazen forehead, right? Right? Like there's a in Hebrew that they have a term if a person's being stubborn. They say rosh lakir. He puts his head on the wall, right? And there's a saying that's attributed to the father of one of my friends. Who he says his father never said it, but it doesn't matter because it's a saying that's kedamna inshe. It's like a slow what do you call it? Slang that people talk and all the time. They say that if a Jew puts his head on the wall is going to fall down, right? Meaning we're stubborn people, right? And we know how to fight, right? So there's a stubbornness, there's a kashiyut, there's a difficulty, harshness that comes to the forehead. But in this place of Atika Kadisha, of Keter, so Hashem has this metzach where it's just ratzon, just goodwill, just desire to do good. So what does that mean? Sheyitzeh takol, that he wants everything. He wants good for everything, right? And yiratzeh takol. Yiratzeh takol means to appease, to calm, to not to acquiesce, but to assuage, to you guys, maybe there's other words in English that I'm not thinking of. But you guys get the point,
yeah.
Right? Now he's going to explain it a little bit more. Afilu sheimtza b'nei, to soothe, right? Perfect. Afilu sheimtza b'nei adam koasim. Even if you find people who are angry. Now, what happens when people that are angry? What does it do to you?
Physical bad effects.
Huh?
It can have physical bad effects.
Right. You're saying if I myself am angry.
Yeah, if you're
right.
angry.
Right. Absolutely.
Oh, you were asking if we're angry.
Yeah. If you encounter a person who's angry,
they lose control of their being rational.
They do.
Yeah.
And what does it do to you?
Oh.
What do you feel when an angry person?
Uncomfortable.
You can get angry too.
Huh? You can get angry too. Yeah. You can get defensive. You can feel unsafe. Right. It's not a pleasant environment. Right. We talked about how a person in Dalit Amos, you feel it from a person. Right. And when the person is angry, and he's not communicating that verbally, right? You pick it up right away, right? Especially someone you can tell right away, right? In our house, I shouldn't say too personally, but well, I'll leave it for another time, maybe, but just because we're on camera, so. But a person knows, you can see even the most subtle things in someone that you love, right? Kol sheken if a person's like fuming, right? And it brings out. So you guys remember that we said Shlomo HaMelech teaches us a rule of nature that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created, that kemayim panim el panim ken lev adam el adam. Just like water, you see your reflection, so too the heart of man to another man. Whatever energy I bring, it's going to pull that out of you, right? And you have to work really hard not to just be a reflection of what I'm energy that I'm pouring into you, right? So if a person comes with anger, it's gonna arouse something uncomfortable in me, right? Something unsettling in me. So here he's saying, even if a person is angry, no, I'm coming with the metzach haratzon. I'm coming with will I want to calm you. Yiratzem, soothe them, right? Try to calm them. V'yashkitem, to quiet them. B'ritzono hatov, with your goodwill. Meaning he told you what to do and how to do it. How do you do it? With your goodwill. Right? Even though Chazal say that you shouldn't try to appease a person in the moment of their heat, of their anger, right? But if you have the skill to do it, so you should do it. You can do it. Most of us don't have the skill to do it. Most of us, what do we do? You know, if you're screaming, so if I scream louder, so maybe that'll make you a little bit quiet, right? Doesn't make anybody feel too good at the end of the equation, right? But if I'm coming with bitzona tov, if I'm coming with goodwill, if you feel that I'm 100%, all I want is good for you, so then you're willing to accept from me. If you have a doubt about it, maybe you think I'm 50% for me and 50% is just because, right? Like some angry people, when people try to calm them, what do they usually feel? Like, let me feel what I'm feeling. I'm feeling what I'm feeling. Like, you're uncomfortable with my feelings, you go deal with it, right? I need to feel what I'm feeling. Like, you're trying to shut me up so that you'll feel okay, but I'm not feeling okay, right? But if he feels this, no, I'm just coming for you. I just want you. I want you to feel good, right? Two things about that. One is he's more receptive to you, and two, the point that this is the point. This is really really important. Not every interaction is an equal transaction, meaning we're both giving and we're both taking here, right? You're coming with anger. I don't want to receive your anger. I'm closing my inbox to receiving any of that anger. I'm coming with something else, right? And I'm hoping that you're going to receive it. I'm coming with ratzon hatov. I'm coming with metzach haratzon. I'm coming with a forehead there's no difficulty here. There's no harshness here. Just with good softness to try to help you, to try to soothe you, right? Because the metzach haratzon, that forehead of goodwill, is always trying to assuage the difficult things and anger, and always trying to appease and calm and bring goodness. Here he adds, he repeats himself, and he adds, and you have to use great wisdom how to calm anger and to calm harshness in this world, right? Shelo yavor hagvul v'yikalkel chas v'shalom v'yaseh dugma, right? Because when anger is in this world, when harshness is in this world, you guys realize that anger is always and harshness. It's always a tool that people are using to try to fix something that in their mind is broken, or right, to try to control a situation, to try to bring, right. Many times when a person is angry or harsh, they're seeking really something calm and good, but they just don't have any other tools how to do it. And so this is what they have at their disposal, and that's what they're doing. So you need great wisdom to help them, to guide them to what they want, and that their anger and their expression of how they're trying to get what they want shouldn't spill over and be damaging, right? Which we all know that anger and harshness are very damaging. ויעשה דוגמה לרצון העליון שהוא נמשך מן החוכמה הנפלאה במצחה דעתיקה ומשם מנצה הכל. And therefore one has to use great wisdom to be able to attach yourself to great wisdom to do this. And I'll tell you guys, I grew up in a family with we were 3 brothers, no girls in the house, just my mom. And my mom's just, as far as women go, she's a very calm lady, Baruch Hashem. So we didn't have, we didn't know what girls were like, and teenage girls, and all that kind of stuff. And now I've got 4 girls at home, also 2 boys. But it's a different world. So this is just a word to the wise, right? That as the father in the house, right? You can set a major tone, not always, but it takes great wisdom, and it mostly, I would say most of that wisdom is to learn yourself how not to get affected by it, right? My father-in-law, of blessed memory, used to say that whoever can nail jello to a tree can raise teenagers. Right? It's a great line. I think he made it up. And that's what it's like, So how to close off my receptors, right? And come with something, not to be responding to, right, whatever the other person is doing, right? Recently there's a story someone I know that a Rav is one of the most loving people you ever meet. Sweet neshama, just loves everybody. Everybody falls in love with him right away because he's just so sweet. And he started talking in shul. He was a guest in a shul, and somebody started screaming at him. And there was some story that he had some type of kapeda, some type of thing that he was holding against this Rav from something he heard from like 20 years ago, right? And here he was his chance to let him have it in front of everybody in the shul. He was screaming with rage, and so one of my friends who was in that shul, he said it was an amazing thing to witness. He said, because the Rav, people, everybody was ready to, take this guy out and show him, and scream at the Rav in front of everybody like that in the shul. And this is a very beloved Rav, right? The Rav said, shh, let him go. Keep telling me what's bothering you. Keep telling me. Something's hurting him. You could see he's man nefesh. He's got bitterness in his soul. Let him get it out. So he got it out. Everybody finally, they had enough. They couldn't take it. The Rav wasn't shaken, right? Everybody else was totally shaken. They quieted him down, and afterwards they were waiting for Kiddush, and the Rav went to go sit next to him, and it was appeasing him and calming him until they became friends, right? So, how do you do that in public? Someone is shaming you and screaming at you, and chirufin v'gidufin, like insults, hurling them at you.
After my military service, I spent the rest of my career in federal law enforcement back in the States, and we had a whole course on this called verbal judo.
Wow.
About because the public's not really mad at you most of the time. They're mad at what you represent, whether it's the federal government or your particular agency or whatever. And so I am less skilled in my personal life, just putting that out there. But in my professional life, I was very good at that because we had a lot of training all throughout the law enforcement academy in dealing with that. But
beautiful.
Yeah.
It's a skill that can be developed. Right.
And the book's in English. It's about 90 pages. You can find it cheap on used bookstores. Or
Verbal judo.
Verbal judo.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
Okay, that's gewaldig. Okay, let's go weiter. Now, there's something else here. Not just at the time of being, appeasing someone who's in anger or in pain or something like that, but also all the time, a person should conduct himself in a way that he's noach lebriot. Noach lebriot is he's pleasant to people, right? Now, all his ways are pleasant. He always seeks the pleasant route. He never seeks confrontation, meaning he doesn't seek it. Sometimes it's unavoidable, and you have to do it. But you do it in a way that's mature, that you walk away feeling good about yourself, not a way that you feel like you lowered your standard, right? Because you were just feeling uncomfortable in the situation. Why do you have to be a person who's always pleasant? That you're known as a person who's pleasant to people. If your midot are harsh in one aspect of your life, right? In bnei adam, with people, lo yitatzu mimenu. So then they're not gonna let you appease them, right? Meaning, right? You guys know who was the biggest example of this was Aaron HaKohen. Aaron HaKohen. It says in the Midrash that he would go around making peace between husband and wife. Right, and he would go sit down with them, and he'd say, or with two friends that got in a fight, and he would go sit down with them and say, listen, Yaakov told me that he's like really upset. He knows it's all his fault, and he's really upset. And he's embarrassed. He doesn't know how to make up with you. And Yitzchak says, really? He said, yeah. Look. So then he goes over to Yaakov. He says, Yaakov, look, I was just by Yitzchak. He knows it's totally his fault. He really feels bad about the whole thing, and he told me he loves you and you're his best friend, and in the Midrash, it's mashma that he would say little white lies, right? The Mefarshim said that he wouldn't say any lies because he was talking about in their soul, they knew that they, if they could have gotten over all their own, childish stuff, they would have, that's how they really felt, right? But he used tremendous wisdom how to do it. But one of the tzaddikim in our generation, Rav Meir Zilverberg says, you think after he did that shtick a few times, people would catch on, like, yeah, okay, Aaron, look, you're Kohen Gadol, I love you, it's very sweet of you, but I know that this is how you work, right? So he says it's not exactly how it worked. Aaron Kohen would come, and Aaron was a person he was like the epitome of loving kindness and sweetness and goodness and softness and connection, everything, all goodness. He was just the epitome of it. And the person would be all angry and feeling self-righteous, what do you call it, self-righteous, indignant, right? I'm right, and until I'll go to my grave and not going to apologize. He's going to learn a lesson. All the different things that a person says to himself, and he's feeling like that, right? But inside, he's really not feeling so good. And then all of a sudden, he gets a knock on the door. He opens the door, and it's Aaron Cohen, right? Just like soft, sweet butter, love, and the person feels so ashamed, like, oh my gosh, I'm thinking like this, I'm behaving like this, and then Aaron would come. Just being in the presence of Aaron would appease them and soften them, and make them be more willing to make up, to make peace. That's why after Aaron passed away, the Midrash says that there was, I don't remember the exact number, but everybody that had a baby boy that year was named Aaron, and they all mourned him. So that's why a person has to make sure, in order to do this, that he's always working on his softness and pleasantness with people. V'zeh tam Mishnah, and this is what the Mishnah says in Pirkei Avot: Kol sheruach habriot nocha imenu, ruach hamakom nocha imenu. Any person who the spirit of people is he's pleasant with people. So also in Shemaim, also the way that he's viewed in heaven is also a place of pleasantness. He's also it's hard to translate it actually. Like Hashem is satisfied with him, right? If people are satisfied with him, so then Hashem is also satisfied with him. That's a sign, man. Okay, any questions about Metzach before we go on to the next one? Right? Now you have a way. Today is a wonderful day because we learn how we can serve God with our forehead. Right? How many people know about that? And now we're going to go on to the Revi'it. We still have time? Yeah, we have time. Okay, the Revi'it is Oznav, his ears. Right? So ears, you guys probably have a better idea how I can serve God with my ears, right? Right? The Chafetz Chaim said why Hashem created this part of the ear.
So you can fold it over.
So you can fold it. If the people are speaking Lashon Hara, so you can, right? It's a natural earplug, right? and the Chafetz Chaim even says, he paskins lahalocha and Sefer Chafetz Chaim, if you're in a situation where people are speaking Lashon Hara and you can't rebuke them and say, you can't stop them for whatever reason, they won't accept it or anything. And you can't leave that. You can't get up and physically leave the premises. You're in a train, right? And you can't get up, right? So you have an obligation in halacha to close your ears like this in front of them, and they'll get it, right? I will say just one thing. Since we're in this room, as a student here, as a bacher here in Machon Meir, so there were some students that were speaking about one of the big rabbis of the generation. They were making jokes, and I was thinking, and I was sitting right here at this table. The room looked a little bit different back then, but I was thinking, should I say something? Should I say? They're not gonna, right? And it was the only time, and I never rebuke, but I decided this time I'm gonna do it. Why? Why did I decide to do it? Because they're speaking about a great rabbi, one of the leaders of the generation. It's not a good thing for them to do, for them, right? So I just said it very softly. I said, guys, you should consider what you're saying. And you're talking about a tzaddik. Maybe there's things around him that make you uncomfortable, but you should consider it because it could be dangerous for you. And they were like, oh yeah, you're right, and they stopped. This is the first time I think I ever rebuked, and it was actually received by anybody, but the only time. But the only reason I'm telling that story is because sometimes it does work, and the person should consider it, right? Even though it's not our subject at all right now. Now we're going to go to the ears. Haruvit. Shiyu oznav notot tamid lishmoa tov. What do you do with your ears? You tilt your ears, you attune them to listening to good. Omnam shem hashav o hamegune lo yikanes behen klal. And negative speech, negative news shouldn't come into his ears at all. Anything that's not befitting, that's not becoming, right? Shouldn't go into his ears. כדרך שסוד ההאזנה העליונה אין שום צעקת דין ולא פגם לשון הרע נכנס שם. Just like the exalted ears, so to speak, of HaKadosh Baruch Hu on the level of Keter, right? That, so to speak, of course, we talk about this, everybody, each week we have to say, right? Of course, Hashem doesn't have ears, eyes, or a forehead, right? But the way that Hashem, so to speak, listens is from that place is nothing negative goes in, right? Meaning, when you hear the midrashim that talk about the angels came before God and they said, well, but you shouldn't save the Jews because X, Y, Z, right? So that's a place called the Beit Din Shomala. That's a lower place than Keter, right? Or a place where the Satan, right, the Samech Mem, right, when he comes and he's a Mikatreg and he's an accusing angel against Am Yisrael to Hashem, it says these are all the sins that they did, right? That's in a much lower place, but in this high place called Keter, in the ears of Keter, nothing negative is allowed to go up there. The ears it's not that he's doing this, that he's closing his ear. Chas v'shalom, the ears are wide open, but nothing negative is allowed in there. The ears are attuned and listening for the good, right? So we might have thought that the only way that you could serve Hashem with your ears is dafka to close them when negative things are happening. But part of the serving God with your ears, in this way of bringing keter in this world, is dafka to be listening for the good, right? And this is something that's so subtle. It says, "V'lo pgam lashon hara nichnas sham." No lashon hara can go into those ears. Kach lo yazin ela tovot v'advarim hamo'ilim. So too, a person should only listen to things that are good and things that are beneficial. Ushar dvarim hamagbirim kas lo yazin aleim klal, and other things that bring anger, right? That trigger a person, they shouldn't come in at all, right? Now, you guys know that listening to lashon hara, if somebody starts speaking lashon hara to you, right? So if you hear it, nothing happened. You didn't transgress anything, right? The problem with listening to lashon hara is to believe it, is lekabel, to accept it, right? So just like with our eyes, like we said, or our thoughts, we can't control everything that comes into our mind. We can control and we can become more skilled at how long we let it stay there, or how long we continue to look at something, right? Think about something. So too when we hear things, right? Someone could spew out a bunch of negative stuff verbally, and it goes, we even say it goes in one ear, comes out the other, right? It just gets filtered out. You don't even hear it. You're not able to. You don't accept it. You don't let it stick in there. וכמו שהנחש ודיבורו ולשונו אינו נכנס למעלה, כך לא ייכנס אליו שום דבר מגונה. היינו, לא תישא שם השווא. Right? And just like the nachash, the snake of Gan Eden, which is another term for the Yetzer and for the Satan, just like he doesn't have access to that place, he's not allowed to go there and present his case. So too, we shouldn't let anything unpleasant come in our ears. Lo tisa shem hashav, the pasuk says, don't listen to a false testimony. Kol sheken shar dibur hamegune shelo yikanes leozno klal, velo tiyeh kashevet ela dvarim tovim. Should only be attuned and listening to good things. I feel like I had something here that I wanted to share with you. Yeah, a beautiful thing that Rav Scheinberger says here. And we're talking about fine-tuning our skill of how to use parts of our body to serve God, right? So you guys know that we have the voluntary parts of our body that we can, you can start your breathing, you can stop your breathing, you can hold your breath, and you have parts of your body that you don't have any control over, like your liver, kidneys, your gallbladder, right? So, so these are parts of our body, these are actions that we do with parts of our body that I think for the most part we consider kind of involuntary, right? I hear what I hear, I see what I see, I think what I think. How much can I control that, right? And even to a lesser degree, but also still, a lot of people in the world think I say what I say, I speak how I speak, right? How much control do I have over that, right? Or if I'm thinking something, so I should say it, right? I can't filter or shift or guide these parts of my behavior. They're so subtle, right? So as opposed to my feet, I can control my feet. I'm not going to walk to the this place or that place. With my hands, I'm not going to do this or that. That I have more control over, right? So, but what happens is when you start to pay attention to these things, when you start to fine-tune yourself, You start to try to align yourself with the midah of keter in all these ways, so then it becomes natural for you, right? So whereas at first somebody says something, a word of lashon hara, and right away you have an inclination to just believe it, to accept it as fact, and now you're going to be careful for this person, right? So you can, okay, now it's, at first you're working on it, it's manual, it takes a lot of work not to believe it, right? Or not to get angry when this person's angry, or not to hear bad, right? To think bad thoughts. It takes a lot of effort, but eventually it becomes your second nature. And it becomes your second nature, and it can become to such a degree that your body, even these things that are so subtle, are totally naturally aligned with Ratzon Hashem. Right? We see this what our sages say with Avram Avinu. Avram Avinu was on such a level that even his body couldn't go against Ratzon Hashem. Right? He wasn't able to. Right? For us, we're able to. We choose not to. It's a conscious thing. Right? But our body, by nature, if I want, I can walk to the kosher restaurant. I can walk to the treif restaurant. Right? It's not like my body's going to not go there if I'm telling it to go there. Right? But with Avram, his body literally wouldn't do it. And that's why it says, at the time of the Akedah, when he was binding Yitzchak, right? His hand wouldn't go. His hand wouldn't do it. And he couldn't figure it out. The Sfarim say he couldn't figure out, why is not my hand not going? Hashem told me to do this. Right? Until to the extent that he had to, it said, the pasuk says, Vayishlach Avram et yado. He sent his hand. Is that how we talk? It's a very interesting language. He sent his hand to do this job of sacrificing his son, because his hand wouldn't go. He had to force his hand, because naturally his body wouldn't do it. So too, we have the Bnei Yisachar explains that the Shvatim, the brothers of Yosef HaTzadik, when they were so convinced, you guys realize that when they sold Yosef, it wasn't because they were just like jealous people. Chas v'shalom. The Shvatim were angels of God. They were so beyond any level of perfection and refinement than any human being that we've ever come encounter with. Right? And they were sure that this whole Mahalchim and Chazal and the Sfarim that they were sure that Yosef HaTzadik was not going to be a few part of Am Yisrael. That he had pulled himself out of the klal. They had every proof. They could lay the sugi out very perfectly in front of you, and they were sure about it, right? And they had to force themselves to sell him. But they wanted to make sure afterwards that they were still in tune with their bodies. Because, I don't know if you've noticed this before, but do you guys remember what they did after they sold Yosef? It says in the pasuk, they ate.
Yeah.
What's the pshat with that? Why does the Torah tell us they sat down to have a meal? They were tired, hungry. I always say, wouldn't it be amazing today? We have biographies and histories. If we could have a 20-part series, biography, detail for detail of Avram Avinu from his first day until his last day. What is his life? What did his oil look like? What conversations between, not just the 5 lines that we have in the Chumash. We do anything with it, but that's not what we get. Hashem only gave us what we need in order to learn. It's not a biography. It's not a history book. So what is it telling us? That they sat down to eat. So it says, I believe it's the Bnei Yisachar. It says that they wanted to check. Even though they believed that Yosef HaTzadik wasn't supposed to be part of Am Yisrael, it still felt crazy, like selling your brother into slavery, right? So they couldn't understand how their bodies could go through with that act. It just didn't make sense to them, right? So they said, we need to check to make sure that that we're really in touch with our bodies. Because sometimes a person can be so hungry, or right, so physically burdened that he's not really in touch with what's going on with him, right? And so they sat down to eat to make sure it wasn't just that they were hungry or something, and that was making them atzbani, that was making them all upset and sell it. And then once they sat down, they said, yeah, our bodies did it. So naturally, we understand here that it's the right thing to do, that we sold them. Because their bodies couldn't go against Ratzon Hashem. Right? That's what it says. So too, when it comes to our ears, your ears, you can develop a natural filter on your ears that no matter, you're attuned all the time to picking up good things. Right? I think as a therapist, you learn how to pick up subtle things in what a person's saying that they don't realize that they just gave you a big maftech, a big key, a big insight into what they're thinking about that they might not even themselves realize, right? You're trained to, just like an archaeologist to find certain things, or a doctor to find certain things, right? So too, your ear is fishing for the good, to hear good things in the world, right? And you even hear the good within the bad, and the bad doesn't, it just flows straight out. It has no place over there. It doesn't even come up into there, right? So B'ezrat Hashem, we should be zocheh to listen to good things, hear good things for the Jewish people, see good things, think good things, and bring in this loving kindness into the world. B'ezrat Hashem. We'll continue next week with the eyes.